Welcome to Leadr Podcast, the ultimate destination for MedTech insights, leadership inspiration, and the latest innovations. I'm Stephanie Pliha, founder of Tribe Agency and your host for Leadr Podcast. Welcome to episode 7 of Leadr Podcast. I just had the pleasure of speaking to a former colleague of mine and now CEO of Hart, Dominique Gross. She's also a mechanical engineer with an MBA and an extensive marketing background, which makes Dominique truly a unicorn as a CEO in the MedTech industry. We unpack the power of market research, having a structured morning, and the delicate balance between strategic vision and execution. Get ready to be inspired by this leader who's revolutionizing healthcare data exchange. Let's jump into the episode. First of all, welcome to episode 7 of Leadr Podcast. Sorry it's taken this long to get you on Leadr, but here you are, Dominique Gross, CEO of Hart, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm glad we got the connection made on this and be some good topics today.
Okay, so let's talk about how we know each other. Probably anyone that's watching this that knows either of us knows how we know each other. But for those that are new to us, I think it's important to always talk about how we know each other.
Yeah.
So I'll start and then you can fill in.
It did start with you anyhow, so that sounds good.
So Dominique and I both worked at Intuitive, and but in very different spots of the company originally. And it was kind of this like fortuitous meeting that many wouldn't have even imagined. You know, my past life was in the Da Vinci side of Intuitive, and Dominique was in the corporate marketing side, and those two lines rarely collide. Mm-hmm. And anyone who worked in both of those divisions understands where we're going with that. But you just don't really, you don't run into each other. You're not at national sales meetings together. You don't really have a lot of overlap unless there's a special campaign or something that's happening. And on that note, I believe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe how we first found out about each other, or how I found out about you, was when I was on the ION team and they were selected to pilot an ABM strategy. Yeah. I think it was originally slated for Da Vinci, but then it ended up going for ION. And I was global marketing manager at that point for ION. And so I was on a call with you and Elise and a few others. I think it was my first interaction with you. Yeah. And I remember, I say this to a lot of guests, so I must just have this weird fascination with people. I had like a little crush on you. I was like, oh, who is that? She's freaking awesome. And she's super smart. And I'm going to stalk her. And that's kind of how it started for me.
For sure.
That's my memory of our origin story.
That's exactly right. You know, at that point at Intuitive, we had kind of just come off the heels of starting the very first brand campaign ever, which was an amazing effort. I think a huge team kind of came together to ideate and bring that to life. And then the next path was to say, okay, how can we turn something like that into a rifle shot, right? How do we get more effective, more prescriptive, drive people down that purchasing process? And I think at the time, ION was kind of just getting up and going. I think they were probably 2 years into their business at that point.
Maybe not even. Maybe
not even. It was pretty early in that journey. And it was great because we got to meet you and got to meet the team. And kind of bring those worlds together, which you're right, almost never crossed paths. Right. But I was so thrilled to do it because you get so far from your clients and your customers when you're in corporate. So it was awesome. It was great to kind of get back to customer insights and just driving something forward and doing some great work.
Our initial contact, I think I reached out to you and asked you to mentor me. And you didn't give me an immediate yes. And I was like a little offended by that. You're like, yeah, maybe. I'm kind of busy. I kind of have a few people I'm already mentoring, but maybe I can like slip you in.
Which is funny because then we probably talked like at least for an hour every week after that point for years. Right. Really.
Yeah. I just didn't go away. This is who I am. I don't take no for an answer. Yeah. And I basically got you to be my mentor without you agreeing to be my mentor. That's what happened.
You know, it's funny because I think on that note, like certainly you reflect on those moments and realize there's a lot of perseverance and grit that you probably learned over your years working there. But something that I certainly look for in teammates that I have now,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of like steady Eddie. My mantra these days is be a duck. You
Yeah.
can have all of the crazy chaos happening underneath. I don't want to see it. I want to see facts. We're cool. We're very cool together, right?
Yeah.
Because it does take a level head and some grit and some perseverance to just do hard things. And that's a lot of what we were doing at times together, is kind of navigating new ideas or trying to change hearts and minds. And that's not easy. And you got to kind of
Yeah.
navigate that with some kind of cool, calm, we can do this, learn a lot on the way. And those are
Yeah.
some lifelong lessons there. It's funny. It's like you reflect on it now and you're like, oh no, that's great. That really was absolutely a good journey together. Just evolving and learning together and kind
Yeah.
of keeping that cool collective mind.
So I personally had amazing leaders in my career, and most of the ones that I still talk to this day, one I actually had on the podcast, you're on the podcast as well. If you approach leadership in a servant way, there's a great book by Ken Blanchard and another author, I can't remember his second author, but it's Servant Leadership. And it's not the only one that's written on servant leadership, but it's essentially, if you focus on getting to know each individual, where they're at, find out what their motivations are, what are their pain points, get to know them personally. Friendly, not friends. There's a difference. You don't need to be friends with them, but friendly and invested. And then also, it's not about the leader. It's about your people.
Yeah.
And you need to find what motivates them and what they're passionate about. And then you help them identify the blind spots and immediately help them come up with a plan to get rid of those or remove them or, lessen them and really highlight their strengths. And that's always how I've leaned into my direct reports, is find what isn't being brought out by them and help them find their own inner light and take a very servant approach. You'll win 100% of the time. People will follow you. When you leave, they will follow you.
Yeah.
And that is very effective. Any other approach to leadership, if it's a power play or if it's a check the box, show up, just your one call a week, but zero investment in that person's success or their business's success, you're going to lose. So I'm a big fan of servant leadership. And I think I witnessed, we didn't work together in leadership capacity for that long, but I did witness you take a similar approach. And I've just seen really good leaders. Most of them are servant leaders. Most of them are there to serve their people and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think that is missed a lot in corporate USA, unfortunately. Your direct reports don't serve you. They may serve the bottom line of the company, but they definitely don't serve you. You are the hired publicist and coach to make them the best they can be and actually to hire them to be your replacement. Ultimately, that's the job.
I completely agree with that. I will also echo, I don't think, particularly like middle management in corporate America, I think is probably one of the hardest jobs because it's hard to do both. It's hard to be a servant leader in that respect, but also kind of act in that capacity where you aren't necessarily able to impact change as much. And so it's hard to do both. And I think it is probably one of the toughest jobs, but you're right. I share the same mindset. My goal this year is to fire myself from as many jobs as possible. And a big part of that is because I have great leaders now in the team who can take that stuff on. And so empowering them to just come in and do great things and lean into their skills and capacities to take us to the next level is amazing. And it feels great. It feels great when you have great leaders underneath you who also feel like they can, help influence things and really drive change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to steal that from you. I haven't heard that. I stole something from Leah last episode. I'm going to steal this one from you. Fire yourself from as many opportunities. I just had this conversation with Alexis this morning. She's like, Steph, you need to focus on operational and let me do my job. I'm like, 100%. Yeah. You absolutely are right. So it comes up daily. And so let's talk about, your journey to CEO, because I know I don't call myself a CEO. I'm just calling myself a founder.
I don't either. I'm allergic to it still. I'm like, I lead people. I don't know.
Yeah. But okay, the commonality between both of us, we both run companies now, right? So there's a lot that goes to that. There's a ton of lessons that are learned. And, you know, it's definitely new for me. I think it's new for you. I don't want to speak on your behalf. And so let's talk about what was your aha moment going from, you know, the roles that you've had in the past to running a company, and what are some of the things that you didn't even think existed, or how have you modified your approach to just business having this new position?
Well, my road to CEO is like a really interesting one. I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, but my dad died last year. And I think it was a really important time of reflection for me to say, what am I doing? Am I fulfilled in my day-to-day? Am I getting out of this what I want, or growing? And I can tell you, I never once was like, oh, I'm going to be a CEO. Never ever was on my radar to be like, okay, this is what's going to happen. But I think I was certainly in a different place after that, of just reflection of what do I want to do? Where do I want to spend my time? And I think that mind frame change really opened up a lot of opportunities, honestly. Over the years, I'm sure you too have been reached out to by recruiters for all sorts of different things. And I always kind of felt like just so secure in corporate America of like, oh gosh, no, I'm not going to take,
don't
risk.
Bother me. Don't have time.
Right. You're like, I'm good. I'm comfortable. Right. And comfortable is a very dangerous word for me now, especially. But I think that pivotal moment of just kind of having a different perspective really kind of made me feel different about what some of those opportunities were that were out there. So as I was transitioning and an opportunity came up to actually come be a CEO of a company, I thought, oh gosh, I don't know. Am I like as versed in this space? Right. So I went to my mentors, just like a lot of people, and said, hey, this opportunity's hit my desk. What do you think? Right. Do you think that I'd be up for that challenge? Because sometimes your mentors know you better than anybody else. Like, where are my weak spots going to be? What am I going to do great at? What do you think? Right. The other thing I asked a lot about was the market and just the product. And so I asked a variety of folks that I had contacts with and said, what do you think? If you had a product like this, would it add value? Do you feel like it's an unmet need in the market? Do you feel like that's something that can really thrive and have success if it had a great commercial engine behind it? And interestingly enough, my mentors were like, of course you can do this. You're going to do great. And I'm like, oh,
I would have told you if you would have asked me the same thing. Yeah.
Right. 100%. I mean, we don't see ourselves in that way sometimes. Right. So that was a huge influence in that decision. And then, of course, the input from the market to say, yes, this is a really valuable solution, really still an unmet need. And I thought, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I have to go get another job. Right.
Right.
And so I put my big girl panties on and said, okay, let's try it. Let's do it. I think we can make this really something amazing. So I was really lucky. We have a phenomenal private equity firm who was more than happy to go on that journey with me. And so we literally talk every day, which is probably somewhat unique in the private equity area. But, they took a chance on me. They had taken a chance on another first-time CEO about a year prior. So I think they had already kind of worked out those maybe nervous jitters of first-time CEOs. And it's been an amazing journey. I can't tell you all the things that I've learned or didn't think.
Just tell me one. I want to know, what's the one thing? Because I mean, if you asked me, I could tell you what's the one thing that is just like you had no idea until you actually held the role.
It's interesting because we've had experience even just in the last many years with a great CEO. I would say that. I think
I 100% agree.
CEO, and I think seeing folks like that is really inspirational to the role. I don't think I had any idea going in, just especially in a small business, how much noise there is.
Yeah.
There is so many decisions to be made. There is so much noise. The spectrum of things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis is not what you think it is.
Yes.
It's not like I get somebody serving me up, hey, make these 3 decisions today. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't know how to do this. Let's figure it out today. We're going to totally redo our human resources information system. How do we do that? How do we make that decision? Right. We've done a top to bottom overhaul of the business I took over, and just the amount of knowledge and in the details that I've gotten into, I would have never expected.
Right.
Especially when you have employees, right? Because you're like,
Right.
okay. But sometimes you just have to know so that you can at least speak intelligibly about it and understand the decisions being made, the trade-offs being made, and be able to communicate that of how it's driving value to your equity firm. So lots of really insightful things. But what I will say is the key takeaway of that experience is I've gotten another great mentor who told me, focus on what's most important and everyone else will do the same. And so that was a miracle for me to say, okay, no, actually revenue is most important. That's all I'm going to do all day.
Let's talk about current day. Tell me about Hart. I'm a big fan of something that we took from Gary, said, always solve big problems.
Oh, yeah.
So I always want to know, what is the big problem that you're focused on and what's out in your market that you're trying to solve for, and how does Hart show up in that?
Well, we are certainly solving a big problem, which I love. And I think it's a big part of why I ultimately decided to join the team and help take them forward. So Hart is a health information technology company. We specialize in data transformations. What that really means is, let's say you're a patient. You go to the ER. You want to go back to your primary care. Well, guess what? They don't talk to each other, right? You never have all your patient information wherever you're trying to go, no matter how connected that health system is. The average hospital or health system has 18 different electronic health records. When I found that out, I was floored. When you think about that over time, they just acquire more facilities.
Right.
Everybody has their own little unique thing, right? And there's no grand plan of how you integrate all that or even get them into one system, right? It's just not possible, especially, in this day and age, having so much evolution in technology, you can't keep up between the old things and the acquisitions versus what is current, right? There's a great example the other day, BJC in Kansas City just bought St. Luke's. They're on two separate unique instances of Epic. You would think that they could just talk to each other, right?
Right.
Of course not.
Of course not. Different versions, different software, right?
Different instances, different whatever. It's all cloud-based now, but still it's a real big challenge. So what Hart does is a few things. But primarily we help bring all of that together so it can talk to each other. We have a health system in the East Coast who has 36 different connected data sources, if you can believe that. And that's amazing that they actually have information at the fingertips where they actually need it, whether they're in the hospital or in the physician's clinic, at urgent care. It feels like a really big problem to solve. A lot of people say interoperability. What the heck does that mean? I don't know. There's a lot of regulations kind of evolving in this space, but yet no one seems to solve things.
Are people just kind of, this is the way it is, and this is just a nuance in this electronic records world, and we just have to deal with it? No one does. Do people think they don't have an option to solve the problem?
I think that's exactly what it is. We have a client we're chatting with right now, and they literally don't believe it's possible. And I can understand that, right? The current way of kind of making things, let's say, transform, right? So let's say you're going to move from one electronic health record to another. It's a very manual process. There are bits and pieces that are automated. Maybe it's like how you pull information out, maybe how you push it back. But actually kind of translating that from one to another is very manual. Most people use a team of folks to really do that in a brute force kind of methodology. And by the end, you really question, is the data quality there? And the beautiful thing about Hart is the co-founder spent almost $20 million with lots of investment across various folks to build out a patented platform to really automate this and do it with success in a tech first way. We had a really funny conversation with somebody a few months ago who said, do you just have an army of people behind you, or are you like legit? I want to see it, right? They don't even believe it's possible. They've been told for years and years, oh, we're tech first, but in reality, it's just an army of people. And I think it's an incredible thing to have something so innovative, so disruptive. I think we've been there before where you're like, no, this is really possible. It's
Right.
kind of the equivalent of moving from, lap surgery to robotic in that
Right.
sense for IT. It's a really disruptive journey, which is its own thing, right? Where you have to do a lot of education in a different way to say, hey, did you realize you could do this in 6 weeks instead of 6 months?
Is it too simplistic to say you are approaching it like the Zapier for electronic health records?
No, I think that's a great description. Yeah. We're a middleware. So I think that's a great example to say we're a connector, right? We're data movers. Truly. Right. I think some of the great things that Hart also does in that journey is, aggregate stuff, can do patient matching. So you have a lot of, patient records.
Like merge records?
Yes.
Meaning if there's duplicative records?
Yes, exactly. Clean up your data on the way.
Yeah.
Really, really amazing things that are high value on the other side. I've been talking with the engineering team. I love the example of like your photos on your iPhone. You can assign them to a person and they will automatically match to that person, right? And sometimes you have to review them because the matching isn't great. But most of the time it's like, no, this is the same person. Let's make this one file.
I use that all the time, by the way, on my phone.
It's a great example, right?
It's amazing. Amazing. I mean, I literally type in the most random things. Like I needed a picture of Jon Snow, my dog, by the way, which we also share a love of dogs, but we won't get into that. I'll type in dog and then it pulls up all pictures of basically Jon Snow because it's the only dog I have in my phone. But yeah, I love that. So your software has the ability to, is it AI driven?
It's actually a little bit AI driven. It's more machine learning, right? Where it's learned over time how to match, which fields to match, and how to drive that level of accuracy. But I mean, that's more or less what AI is. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm excited to potentially work with you guys on building that out. I mean, for me, Zapier was super disruptive to the digital marketing enterprise. I mean, you don't have to rely on each SaaS having all the built-in integrations because software evolves on a daily basis and new things come out all the time. And you can't engineer an integration for every single thing out there, right? No. So Zap makes it all neutral, right? So you can zap to pretty much anything and you don't have to have and worry about that integration. So if you approach this market like that, I think you guys are going to have wild success. There's a lot to know about that.
Yeah, it's a really neat journey. The kinds of things the engineering team does on a day-to-day basis is incredible. You're like, wow, I just took 30% of the workload out of this, and this is already the fastest thing on the market. Now we've got totally different issues.
What was the founder's backstory? Were they a data engineer or
engineer. We had 2 co-founders. Actually, one of them was more from like academia and industry from a different background. The other co-founder was from engineering, right? And a lot of that experience kind of building up. But, this is kind of that general nuance. And I'm sure to some extent you've seen others who go through this where you may have amazing founders who do the most incredible things because they've got these just radical, innovative ideas. But commercialization is a different beast altogether. And if you don't 100%. Have those skill sets brought into your business, it can really become stifled, even though it's an amazing product, it's an amazing team. And that's really what the situation was at Hart. They just didn't ever have that skill set to really take it to scale where it was, the potential of this product. So very fortunate to be here now to really help drive that forward for the business.
I love that. That's actually why I'm employed and why you're employed. So every client I have, they're typically founders. Sometimes they're doctors, sometimes they're engineers, sometimes they're both. And they do have all the best intentions and they're the creative behind it. They know what they're hoping to accomplish. They know the problem they're trying to solve. And they've invented this incredible product. And then they need someone to help pull that story out. And then our tagline is make your brand a verb. So to get the brand to a point where it's got some sticky factor to it and then push it to all the different channels. And they really are all thumbs when it comes to that piece of it. And that's just one part of commercialization. The other part is product road mapping, upstream strategy, everything that comes into play with how you roll out a product, market research, all the things that you and I talked about for years at Intuitive. But that's actually what we apply to our clients. And it sounds like exactly what you were brought in to do. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's your skill set. I mean,
it is.
That's great.
This is my bread and butter, which is pretty cool to be able to share that with this business after, just honing those skill sets for the better part of 2 decades. I'm sure you can appreciate that too. I'm wearing some new hats these days, carrying a bag, which is totally different. I'm like maybe the worst salesperson on the planet, but that's okay.
No.
She's like,
no,
but you're
true.
Right. The way that comes to fruition across your business, it's funny. We have really 3 strategies and have since I started, which is hopefully the sign of a good strategy, right? When your strategy doesn't change, ideally it's the right one. But the first is to just grow net new logos, right? As a smaller business, we're focused on double, triple, triple. I don't know if you've heard that for small businesses, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's a different ball of wax to achieve. So that's one amazing and certainly a big goal for us. The 2, in terms of strategy, is market-focused innovation. And we changed it a lot because I think internally people had this kind of mental framework around innovation, right? And just this constant ideation and incubation is often, I think, founders kind of iterate on. And really shifting that mind frame away from you don't have to develop a new product to serve your market in a new way. And can you just take what you have and market it in all of the ways that it can be marketed and sold in markets that it serves, right? To the unmet needs. And it's a very different way to think about life where you don't have to invest millions and millions of dollars for a net new shiny widget to still have new offerings and new solutions. And that has been very revolutionary for us in our culture to just think differently, more around the market versus this particular product or feature. And I feel like that's really underdone in terms of just strategies. And the last one we have, which actually came from more of just like small business land, is to scale, we need to drive operational maturity.
Yeah.
That comes to fruition in so many ways. It's just wild. So that's been a big focus for us as well. But the 3 have been really interesting. They've really evolved a lot of our culture and kind of how we approach things and focus. But we're really lucky. They ask me all the time, like, what's your sentiment on the business? And my sentiment is always the only people who will stop us from being successful is ourselves. Because when you have a product and an unmet need in the market and it's priced fairly, that's all. Like, you are the only thing that's between you and making that happen, right? So I have to remind myself a lot, like, clear the decks. Don't be complicated, right? Be the easiest person to do business with and you will be successful. And that drives a lot of our decision making in terms of how we're going to set up our infrastructure, how we manage our invoices, how we manage our contracts. A lot of those things have really changed a lot in that mind frame of just scale, be super easy to do business with, and then, think about your market differently. Are you innovating to the market versus the product?
Market research. So for whatever reason, people really struggle to see the priority of it. And you, having a background in marketing, just like I do, voice of customer is in the research, right? And so if you don't understand the noise, the market needs, you can't speak to the needs. You can guess to the needs, but it's going to be a trial and error, wide net marketing approach than a very prescriptive and specific approach. And so for the pain of going through a modicum of market research, which we have a way to make it really easy. We can do it through surveys. We can do it through audio and video. I'm sure you have tons from your experience in the past of ways to assemble a voice of customer, but so many people skip that part. And to me, I was thinking about what's the secret ingredient behind a brand that thrives? It's market research.
Absolutely.
because they literally asked. It's just asking what people need and asking why the problem hasn't been solved and what is the actual problem that needs to be solved. Because a lot of people think they know. Founders have the best intentions and they're the inventors. But if you don't prime the market, you don't really understand the need, you don't understand the problems that they're currently facing, the barriers of entry and everything in between, you're going to struggle when what you were talking about, making it simple and just approaching the market in a different way, not re-engineering your product, but really applying what you know about the market and what is the gap. And you can't get to that in a very specific way unless you've done some semblance of market research.
Yeah, I'd even take it a step further to say, if you don't do it, do you even know if you want to serve that market?
Right.
One of the biggest eye-opening things for me when I joined Hart is we can serve almost any kind of healthcare market. It could be, behavioral health. It can be ambulatory. It can be hospitals. It can be physician groups. It could even be like the healthcare service businesses, like the Simplers of the world. You wouldn't believe it, but realistically, you can go anywhere with it. Right. And without market research, you can get really lost quickly to say, who is my product serving? Do I have even a good product market fit, frankly?
Yes.
And that was so eye-opening. You'll love this story because this is just one of those wild days as a CEO. You're like, oh my gosh, this never would have occurred to me. Day one for me, I started and I met with all of the current employees at the time. And one of the key questions I asked them was, what do you think our products are? What do you think the value is? And who do you think we serve? And literally not a single one of them could articulate what the product was, what the value was, or who we served.
And they all had different answers.
All of them.
Yeah.
And it's eye-opening because I think in that process, you realize, like, one, do we have a good why? And for what purpose? And I think healthcare is generally a really good feel good place to work. So people naturally gravitate towards that. But what I would say in that whole journey was I learned that we probably serve 15 different kinds of markets and we don't serve them equally. And so that was a hard lesson to say, okay, did you know we actually have 4 of this product? No? Okay, well, let's understand that these products actually serve different people and they serve them differently in terms of like fit. But because we hadn't done any of that research of who are my decision makers, who are my end users, how am I addressing their needs in this journey? They all have different things that they want or expect. And I think that's been really interesting. It's actually even really changed our go-to-market strategy. I'm not sure anyone realized we had a go-to-market strategy before, but we sure as heck do now, where there are certain markets where there's a lot of volume that for us, we're going to just simply use channel partners because to get to a leadership market share position for volume, like we're just never going to be able to hire that many salespeople to address that in the needs that they have. Versus there's some where we obviously want to go direct, but all of that stems from market research, right? How are we, formulating top to bottom what we do, how we're addressing it, where we're going, and ultimately driving profitability and hopefully really great customer satisfaction in that journey, right?
It shows empathy too, which I think is the unsung hero in it.
Yeah.
If you actually understand the audience and you're serving, and you really understand their persona, their profile, how they consume information, what are their pain points, you show up with empathy, and that's the best way to build trust and authority right out of the gate. Versus if you're just spraying your solution to whoever will pick it up, it's probably someone will pick it up. But like you said, you're now spreading yourself to a bunch of different places where maybe channel marketing would have been your best bet. Right. And then you could have taken the resources you have and really applied it to the holy grail solution for your company, right? Where you show up best and where the audience really needs it. And then, maybe even exit out of some of those things. I'm learning I'm going on a year and a half with Tribe, what I started out thinking I would serve versus what I actually am doing now are totally different. Like I have to
Yeah,
completely change my website because of it. And by the way, these are kind of born out of what I enjoy too. And so I think
yeah,
for, a CEO of a company, you also have to go where you guys are best known and also are best. And
exactly.
you
Yes,
don't want
I
to
so
enter in a
agree.
market where you're average.
I had this amazing professor when I was doing my MBA. And the one thing he told us when we were going through our new product development class was really like, you need to think about your customers' needs. Nobody goes to a restaurant and orders lukewarm tea. They order iced tea, they order
Yeah.
hot tea. Which one are you? Right.
Yeah.
So I use that a lot with the team. Like, what is this? Is it hot
Mm-hmm.
tea? Is it iced tea? Because nobody wants something that doesn't do anything in the middle.
Right.
And that's tough. It's a good driver though for trade-offs in that journey and just really understanding what you're trying to accomplish.
If you're in that little position where you're like, is our product bad or are we just not marketing it correctly? It's usually tied to not understanding the problem and not understanding the voice of customer, the person you're actually trying to get to buy.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and I would say it even goes through like that voice of customer really doesn't stop with just your product, right?
Yep.
It's how that experience happens in general. I'll give you a great example.
Totally.
This is a fun one. I went to go see one of our customers not too long ago, and they're a longtime customer. They're amazing people. They do great work. But when they first bought with Hart, Hart had showed up, the team showed up in jeans, a t-shirt, and their clear frame glasses to a room full of suits. Because, healthcare is so traditional. Everybody's always in their black, blue, gray suit
Of course.
most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these kids show up in their, more California laid back vibe. And amazingly enough, they still bought this product, which is just unfathomable. But years later, they're telling me this story. I'm like, oh my gosh, right?
You didn't know your personas.
Exactly. Like they didn't know kind of who they're selling into in an effective way to say, okay, am I showing up to the expectation of my clients? And whether that's from your product, your people, your post-sale experience. Gosh, all of that, right? And following that through. So I spend a lot of time kind of just, especially these days, thinking about how do we optimize that? What's the expectation? How can we level up that expectation? I'm a big fan of, just saying, okay, if there's a low bar, like we don't need to accept that. We can show them that this can be better as well.
Right.
So that's been really interesting. And frankly, I think our market with kind of a more manual approach, the bar is very low. People don't expect great quality on the other side because they know people are just, doing their best to brute force through something. And there are some really kind of inherent market expectations that we can change. And that's incredible. But you do have to think that whole spectrum through. You can't just say, okay, am I marketing great? Well, I can show up on social media all day and look amazing. But if that's not the experience, does it really matter?
A lot of people that run companies have morning routines, especially in a startup environment where everything's very unstructured.
Yeah.
And it is really easy to let your day just get away from you without a lot of focus and intention.
Right.
And so I've been very intentional about starting my day in a way where I know it's going to set me up for success throughout the day. And I'm happy to share that. But I want to hear yours first.
It's funny. I actually was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, the Operators. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but regardless, it's a bunch of small business folks. They were talking about the same thing. How do you start your day?
Okay.
And I actually don't start my day in a more methodical way. I try to get as much sleep as possible. That's actually my only goal.
I remember this about you. You're a big sleeper.
I'm a big sleeper. And
I remember you actually missed like a morning coffee with someone that you slept in.
Not intentionally, but yes, I do. I still try and get as much sleep as possible. There's a lot of reasons for that, especially I find now that I am in a small business where there is just so much. I mean, I come home some days and my kids are like asking me anything. And I'm like, I'm all tapped out on decisions today. Try again tomorrow. Ask your dad if you need something right now. So I actually try to focus more on the go to bed. I find before I go to bed, I need to write down absolutely everything that's top of mind. And that's one of the things I took away from the operators podcast as well is a lot of what your job is as you're running a business is just writing stuff down. And it's bananas how much of that is true, right? I don't think of myself as a writer even remotely, but I find myself taking notes on things all day, every day. So what I'll often do before I go to bed is just sit down and write down the 3 things I need to do. That's it. Just the 3 things I need to do either the next morning or within that week, whatever that timeline looks like, so that I can just stay organized and focused. Usually it's revenue focused. Sometimes it's people oriented. But just really kind of trying to gather my thoughts and write stuff down. And that has been very, like kind of refreshing in some ways because I don't stress about it before I go to bed.
You get it out of your brain.
I get it out. It's
lament
done.
on it all night.
I've got a plan. I've even started doing more of like, it sounds dumb, but like outfit planning before I go to bed. So I have less decisions to make in the day.
Okay.
Like I don't want to make a ton of decisions in any given day. It's exhausting, you know, like with the amount of stuff that happens in any given day, I try to minimize as much as possible that needs to happen in that given day. And then I will say, like, one of the things I do try and do, which you know about me, is like, I still try and work out a fair bit. And that usually happens in the morning. So if there's any sort of routine, it's always coffee first. It's probably not recommended, but I totally can't shake it. So I'm like,
I can't either. I'll never shake it.
Right?
I'm good with it. If it takes years off my life, it's fine because I was happy drinking coffee.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, I try and sleep as much as possible. And then in the morning, I usually try and get at least a walk in, something to just kind of reset and then go about the day. Hopefully a good workout. It's great for stress.
I start out with coffee, 100%.
100%. Yeah.
With, you know, you've been with me, we've ordered coffee.
Absolutely. Coffee and a
you
walk.
You go black. I go as sweet as possible.
Oh gosh, that's right.
And then I usually wake up with what I feel is a high cortisol amount. I can kind of feel it. So I usually meditate and kind of set intention for the day in my mindset. And one of my employees, Alexis, she also works she's not a neuropsychologist, but she works in memory and mindset and intention. And she knows a lot more about it than I do. So I'm not going to try and paraphrase her, but her and I were talking the other day. Dr. Amen is big on mindset. You can find him on YouTube. I don't know much about him. He's based out of Orange County, but he talks about like when you wake up, the first thing you should tell yourself is today's going to be a great day and literally build that loop in your brain. Even if you don't think it's going to be, you have to verbally say that. And so I've been saying that like since the start of the year, something that I've been doing literally, whether it's pouring out rain or you're freezing or you didn't sleep last night or whatever, I wake up and immediately say that out loud because apparently something about that then conditions your brain to only accept that. Ooh, and on the flip side, if you wake up and go, this is going to be a shitty day, you know, or have this like opinion that like you're already self-fulfilling, then more than likely you're going to attract that. And so there's a lot on YouTube for Dr. Amen. I don't get paid to promote him. I don't even know him. So check it out. I've definitely been impacted by it. So that's one thing is I'm setting my own intentions verbally every morning, intentionally. I love my coffee. That's something I get pleasure out of. These are the things that are for me. Yeah. And then I've learned on the days I'm super productive and literally can motor all day, it's when I work out. Either when I run. Yeah. When I run or when I, go do CrossFit. Those are kind of my 2 jams and both are really motivating to me. Then the rest of the day, I can take on the kicks in the gut and the punches in the face all day long. I don't, thankfully that doesn't happen. My clients are very friendly people, but
it's so true. I actually started asking this as a interview question. So we're doing a lot of interviewing these days. You're constantly in recruiting mode when you're in a small business. And so I literally just started asking, how do you manage stress? What's your approach to life with that? And if exercise isn't in there, I start to get a little worried because it is,
even if it's
such
walking,
a neutralizer. Exactly. Right. Just get outside. Yes. It's a really powerful tool. And I do think the same, right? It's it's extremely helpful, I find, especially when you're in a business like this where there is just a lot happening. What's your
Yes.
release? How do you kind of let things go?
Yes. You also want to show up balanced.
Yeah.
And if you show up and you've done good things for yourself, you've set your own mind intention, you've indulged in coffee or whatever it is that you like to indulge. Maybe it's hanging out with your dog, or maybe it's praying, or maybe it's meditating, whatever brings you joy.
Yeah.
And then you go and doing something good for yourself. Then you're showing up to the office or on the next call as a whole person, and you feel like you can contribute. What I think is the critical error of many, myself included, is when you wake up and grab your phone. When you wake up, grab your phone, and you start seeing all the hate mail or all the mail, all the fire drills, and you just open that shit up. And then all of a sudden you're like, I don't really have time to work out because I got to put out this fire drill.
Right.
And and then you immediately go into work mode. You don't shower, or you just flip out and you just turn off like what is supposed to be intentional for you. I know I'm like getting really philosophical on this, but it's something
you're onto something with that. And it's something I too, because I preserve my sleep. So you know this. I always go to sleep mode, and it's during the whole time, so, an hour or whatever before bed to whenever my alarm's going to go off in the morning. And so it's like constantly quiet. So God help you if you're trying to get a hold of me while I'm in sleep mode. But I think it has that same
sleep's really good for you.
It's great. I'm so lucky in that sense, right? Because it is so rejuvenating for me, and thank God. But a part of that was cutting the noise, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that you're not getting these constant interruptions or whatever, because partially that's sort of like the morning routine of like, I don't need to be bombarded with that until I'm ready for it, right?
Yes.
I want to sit down. I want to kind of like not moderate my time in that sense, but just like kind of be ready to face that at that moment in the day.
So the 3 questions, kind of speed round, that I ask every guest. 1, I want to hear about a mentor and how they've impacted your life and who you want to pay it forward to. I want to hear about your superpower, which I actually got the term superpower from you.
Yes.
And I want to talk about a book that has inspired you that you think every business owner or CEO should read. So, speed round.
It's quite the list. Let's see. Mentor. I don't have just one, as I'm sure you probably already know. I have many in different areas. And maybe that's the key message, right? Is I have a bunch of mentors in different places who are amazing for different reasons.
Yeah.
I have one who's a marketing mentor who just taught me everything I know and continues to be a sounding board on that sense. I have one who's more like personal versus professional, who just knows a lot about leadership. And so that person I go to for all sorts of grounding things in that perspective. Even my father-in-law is now my financial guru, which is hilarious. He was a CPA at KPMG, right? So my mentors and my leaders,
it's a pretty good pedigree.
Kind of like, panel continues to grow every day.
Okay.
But I would say holistically, all of them have contributed to my success over the years, or making different decisions for even that matter, right? So my mentor network continues to grow, but I would say different people in different areas. My
superpower. Yes.
It's funny. This is still an interview question for me. I don't know if you knew that I literally ask every candidate, what's your superpower? It's always so informative.
It is
a lot about somebody. So my superpower has actually evolved over the years, which is really interesting. But I would say the core of my superpower is probably not a surprise. I'm like a strategist at heart. I love strategy. I love connecting dots. I love kind of bringing things together to formulate something. And I would say how it's evolved is now I'm a master executor. And that's really been in the last 3 years, I would say that's really kind of galvanized, I guess, and kind of shifted from just doing strategy to more just strategy plus execution.
That's all that matters. If you have a great strategy and no execution, then you don't have a strategy. Right?
Oh, I don't know. My dream job forever and ever was just to be like a senior director of strategy and not have any direct reports. And boy, did that pan out. I know. Oh my gosh.
All right. I agree with you on strategy. That is a superpower of yours. I haven't seen you in this role, but hopefully we'll get to work together soon and I'll get to see that. But okay. So then leaving us with, what book? I have a ton of books in my library. I'm staring out right now, but what's like the number one book? I'm sure you've read a ton, but what's the number one that has made an impact on the way you approach business that you think would benefit someone in the MedTech space?
My number one book, I told you earlier, I had it actually. Product Leadership. It's by Robert Cooper. It's kind of like an institution, I think. I still have bookmarks in it. I've had it for years and years and years. And I always go back to it in terms of like just ideating around products and how you serve markets and how you think about your business and different times for different things. And it's an interesting one. I would say I would partner that too always with a leadership book. My leadership book is the 1 Minute Manager.
Love. Obsessed.
I know, right?
Obsessed.
It's such a great book. And it's just so interesting. One of my mentors actually practiced it on a regular, like just every day. And it was so interesting because I learned a lot from him about leadership and how to really think about taking people on the journey, checking in on a regular basis, and just this kind of more like integrative perspective on how you build teams. And it's just interesting. So those would be my two. One more business, like really kind of operationalizing how you think about
blocking
products.
and tackling.
Yes. Versus how do you take people on the journey? And you cannot run a business successfully if you do not do both.
I do want to say thank you.
Yeah.
I know your time is limited and I appreciate your time today on Leadr Podcast. Obviously, we talk on a frequent basis already, but it's nice to have you on and just get to reflect on what Hart is looking to bring to the market. I wish you all the best with that, and we'll continue to check in. And again, thank you for everything that you did for me as a human and as a professional, but also I look forward to what this journey takes us both on for the next year to come.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.